Dr. Stephen Greer, CE5 contact.
Hey. Thank you. Oh, look, you guys are still hanging out at 10 o'clock. I'm very impressed. You're going to be cleared to come on an expedition because we stay out till 2 or 3 in the morning. Thank you guys for hanging in there. I think it's cooling down some too. So this session is a Q&A period, and you can ask whatever you I guess they've been sent in. I don't know how many there are. Now, a fair warning, one of my faults, of which I have many, is that if a question is a really particularly profound one, I may go on for long, so you don't get all the answers in. But it's because it's something that I really want to go deeper. So we have 59 minutes. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to the guest of honor here.
Thank you. Okay, our first question is from an Events Plus subscriber on the live stream, on the live chat. It's Sam from Wisconsin.
Oh, great.
Do you have any advice for parents going on this journey? How do you introduce your family to the subject safely? Do they join the CE5 contacts? Or do they think you're crazy?
It depends on the age of the child. So I think that, first of all, once a child is 5 or 6, they can learn sort of a walking meditation. So they can just have a simple walking meditation. You can look those up, and it's very useful. And my children started coming out at a pretty young age with me, 8 or 9. Now, older children may be resistant because they think it's too weird. Don't force it. So the dynamic force of example, to me, is what's the most powerful. And the children and other members of your family may or may not go along with it. They may think you're a kook. They may think it's crazy. They may think it's a bridge too far. That's fine. The worst thing are people who proselytize. So what I tell people, there's a wonderful ancient saying, the wise are they who speak not, unless they have a hearer, someone actually hearing you. And that's true whether it's a child or an adult or a stranger. So what I've learned is to let people ask and then answer and take it as far as you can take it until they look like they're shutting down. So the art of sharing with other intelligent beings is not to push too far where it becomes, again, forced. Instead, there should be this inner unfolding. So with children, family members, spouses, associates, friends, that's just my advice to that. And I think it's very important. But yes, children can do it. And, we've had, experiences with young people who have amazing experiences with this, because let's face it, they are not as indoctrinated as we are. And little children, I know when I was 3, 4, 5, I had all these experiences with consciousness and with nature and with celestial perception. That's when you actually, with your eyes, you see the finer energies, like the aura radiating from a flower or other. And children, pure-hearted children without the filters we have up, the hard intellectual filters, will experience that. So yes, children can be very, now, depending on the age, once they get to a certain age, they're going to may push back. If they push back, let them be. Nothing should ever be forced. It should unfold organically, naturally. So that's my advice.
Okay. Yeah. Our next question is from here in the audience at Gaia Sphere, and it's from Kiri. Beyond our day-to-day meditation practices, what are some practical steps we as individuals can take to raise consciousness amidst all of the current polarity and negativity?
You just have to share the truth. With social media, it's very easy to put out information and share with other people. For example, send them to our website, SiriusDisclosure.com, SIRIUS, like the star, disclosure.com. Have them see the documentaries that we have. Learn. So I think for a lot of people, it's really about networking. And it's sort of this heart-to-heart, person-to-person thing. Because remember, what I'm doing, once we went too far, the intelligence community made sure that most of the mainstream media would ban what we're doing. And so the way we've gotten to this point is organic. It's sort of this heart-to-heart sharing, and then a lot of, like celebrity supporters who then put our links out. But each person can do that. So I think you can actually network this to more people than you realize if you make an effort at doing it through social media and circles of friends and one to another to another. Because it's not that hard. If each person has 100 people in their network, there may be 10 people who resonate with it, but then they share it with another 1,000 and on and on and on. So that's what everyone can do in terms of sharing the information. I think in terms of day to day, each person needs to ask themselves, what are my particular gifts and abilities? Everyone has unique ones. Like, you do not want to give me a computer. I'm probably going to throw it through the door or window. And there's certain things, you don't want me to do. And there are other people who get, so I think it's really important for everyone to say, what is my gift? What am I good at? What is my heart passion? And you go with your passion and you share that. And most people will be surprised. I want to tell a little story very quickly. Back in the days, way back when I was early on doing this, but I ended up in the media. Like I said, I was on Larry King Live and a lot of shows. And the chief of staff for the hospital, a woman, a pathologist, wanted me, who ran the lab, wanted me to do medical grand rounds on extraterrestrial intelligence and UFOs. Now, medical grand rounds is usually when a doctor comes in that's going to do a in-service to the staff on some new medical or technical or whatever. But she wanted me to do it on this. I'm going, it's into my medical career. And I refused. She finally persisted. I said, okay, I'll do it. So this is very early in the morning. It's usually at 7 a.m. or something. And so I did it. And there was they never seen such a turnout. There wasn't enough room in the auditorium for the hospital for all the doctors, nurses, and other people who want to come to this. I went, this is interesting. And these are just regular, conventional people out there. Fine, I'm sharing this story for a reason. People should speak their truth more. People are ready for this. And about a week later, I had gone up to a code blue in the ICU, cardiac arrest. And I got on the elevator, and there was this curmudgeon of a surgeon. There can be very kind of little guy. I called him George of the Jungle. His name was George. And he walked like this. And he looks around like this first, sees there's no one getting on the elevator with us. So he hops on and goes, I just want to know that what you're doing is the most important thing. Keep it up and don't give up. And then the doors open, he gets off, never says another word. And this was someone every single person listening and in this audience would think would never be interested in this. But it's sort of, a lot of people are kind of in the closet about this because they're interested, they're afraid of the social opprobrium, ridicule of their peers. And what I think all of us need to do is to say, we need to be a leader in our community, our career, whatever, and begin to speak the truth about this unashamedly, honestly, to the extent of our capacity. And I think that's something everyone should have the courage to do, but you kind of have to find your sea legs. You have to kind of figure out how to do it and how you can do it effectively with people who are in your network.
Our next question is Colin from Scotland, who is an Events Plus member on the live stream. Can ETs be translucent? I asked this because I saw a translucent something like a 6-meter long bubble, but the underneath had a complex set of geometric shapes.
Absolutely. Most of the time, when they're not fully 3D, they can appear in these transdimensional, we're going to get into this more tomorrow, transdimensional physics. So a very similar event that he's talking about happened. I was reminded at dinner to tell this story. Back some years ago, I was in Palm Beach or near Palm Beach, and we were doing just a weekend event. I think it was in the 90s, actually. And before the event, I was contacted by these 2 women who were up in years at that time, who had been, if you ever saw the movie Gandhi, there were these young European women who were in his volunteer network household, very, very famous, sort of, they were in service to his mission for peace and nonviolent change and all that. And they were there when he was shot. The last thing Gandhi did was turn to the shooter and bless him and fell dead. The same night, Gandhi, in a lucid dream, contacted both of them and told them to come to this event I was doing in Florida. And they had not been in touch for years. And so they called each other, we have to go. So these two young women who were now in their 70s, I guess, I mean, it's like 50 years later in the 90s from the 40s, came. And as we're walking out to go onto the beach, we knew that Gandhi in spirit was with us. And these people who had been in such pure-hearted service to what he was doing were there in person. And there was this translucent, about the size of a beach ball, sphere, blue, that materialized right along us as we walked in. And it was twilight. It wasn't dark yet. And so that was a beautiful connection. And so people from the other side who are in these other states of consciousness, they begin to realize that there is life throughout the universe. But the ones that are interstellar are transdimensional. And while they're in their bodies of light, in the worlds of light, they learn a lot about that. And so for some reason, Gandhi, reached out in a lucid dream, but the exact same moment, the same night, they literally picked up the phone and called each other. It's beautiful. So yes, that is often how they appear. And we all have these sort of, we look at movies like Close Encounters of the Third Kind and all this, and it's very concrete and it's very linear and material. And they are like that when they're full on 3D. And that was easier in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s, 90s. But our technologies and sensors have gotten so much more advanced, and our ability to track, target, strike these objects in covert weapon systems, directional energy weapons, have become so advanced that more and more it's these transdimensional, sort of seems ephemeral, quickly appearing and disappearing events that happen. And so, yes, people should understand that that is the dominant way. The caricature way of walking up and kicking the tires on a UFO, that's the least likely. That experience he had in Scotland is actually classic.
I'm sure you just made Colin's day. Our next question will be patched in live from a watch party with
great.
Tanya in Quebec, Canada.
Hi, Dr. Greer.
Hey.
I want to first start by saying thank you so much for what you're doing. My question is, what happens once we do raise the consciousness, and what's the ultimate goal?
Well, when consciousness of the planet is raised into higher states of actual meditative enlightenment, the rest of the society transforms, and it can be very quick. Here's a caveat. That transition point is actually fraught. It needs to be guided very carefully. Why? Go back and look at Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, the movie. You'll see that there's a place where we put in there superfluidity in helium, where you cool a container of helium down to absolute zero. And at the point that 1% of those atoms or molecules of helium become aligned and coherent, just at the instant before it becomes field coherence, it gets crazy chaotic. That's where we are. So as more of humanity begins to emerge into the light, there's also going to be a concomitant chaos in society, but that's what happens. Now, it doesn't have to be so terrible. That's where it has to be guided. And, this is why it's so important that people become wise guides to this future, which I think all of us here want to be. And so after that, what you'll see, a decade after this transition would be equal to a millennium in the past, 1,000 years. Because once the already extant, fully developed technologies that are classified or put to peaceful use, not weapon systems, peaceful use. The world within 10 to 20 years will become almost unrecognizable to what we see here. One of the reasons for the secrecy is because, when I was at Lawrence Rockefeller's ranch trying to get the Clintons to do something about this, because he was hosting, I was there and he hosted the Clintons there at the JY Ranch out in the Tetons, Grand Tetons up here. In 93, he took me out on the deck of this ranch, this cool place in the middle. They owned the whole Teton Range. Of course, Rockefellers owned everything. And so he had me, and he goes, Dr. Greer, if this comes out and it's disclosed, no aspect of life on Earth will be unchanged. So vast and profound are the implications. I say, yes, Lawrence, that's why it's secret. It's not trivial. It literally, so if you take all the scientific revolution, they say mid-1800s to now, take everything that's developed technologically, the disclosure of the technologies behind interstellar, 0 point, electromagnetic, so-called lifter levitation systems, the effect that will have in advancing human civilization is greater than all of that 150 years or 200 years, literally greater. But the placeholders and the power holders who have the current reins of power don't want to see that. So that is why it's such an enormous change. It's huge. It's why no president wants to do it. It's why when I met with an admiral who was the head of CONUS, Continental United States Security, he says, yes, this needs to happen. It's a mistake if it was ever kept secret. But I just want to retire from this command and go fishing at my place out in Montana. No, so everyone puts their pants on one leg at a time. And for the most part, they just don't want to take it on. It's too much. It can be overwhelming to people who have that responsibility. And I understand that. I mean, I'm not ridiculing it at all. I've had to grapple with it. But it's the right thing to do. My only question is it the right thing to do? I say, yes, it should have been done 100 years ago. So let's get on. But now that we've waited this long, it's going to be a very kind of bumpy, but then on the other side, imagine this, a civilization, no wars, no poverty, no pollution, no scarcity. First level of these technologies, all energy is free, manufacturing costs drop 80%, the work week goes down to 10 or 15 hours. There's no place on the earth that's being ravaged because of mining. Next phase, you bring in the transdimensional manufacturing, where it's kind of like Star Trek, push a button, it materializes it. Those are absolutely doable. So, you're talking within 20 to 50 years, a transformation of human civilization, society, that is almost unimaginable to most people. Now, the good news is that the power would pass to the people, because every village, home, whatever, would be independent, self-sufficient. So those who are in the central macroeconomic elite become unnecessary, which is why they've only allowed the disclosure of technologies that can be monetized but centrally controlled, like the silicon chip and telecommunication and fiber optics, and those things were all reverse engineered from extraterrestrial vehicles through covert and then passed to corporations to bring out. But the real action's been kept secret. So it will be a big change. But as you come out of that, then you say you have a foundation for genuine lasting peace based on justice, and not a world of scarcity, but a world of abundance. Then on that foundation, the whole world can then begin to turn to what we're doing here and to the exploration of higher states of consciousness. And so very quickly, and one other thing about this, I know I'm going on a bit long, is that in the studies have been done in neuroscience and genetics, and particularly epigenetics, which are, the environmental and even conscious effects of turning on and off genes, which used to be called junk DNA. Well, it turns out it ain't junk. So they've found that from one father and mother to a child, what they're doing and meditating can actually change that progeny. Moreover, in one person's lifespan, people who meditate have their IQs go up. Mine certainly has, so and that's true. And they've done studies to prove this. So imagine that when people aren't scrapping for the last little bit of dust in a material scarce society, and there's abundance, and people begin to just put some of their attention on these supernal, wondrous explorations in consciousness, that's going to quicken not only everyone on the planet and raise them, but the children coming along are going to be orders of magnitude beyond. And that's not going to take thousands of years. We're talking a few generations, and then we're going. So I'm just trying to give you sort of a big picture what we're doing, what we are all really doing.
Our next question is from Anna, here in the audience at Gaia Sphere. It seems that ETs are quite different and far more evolved than humans, but what major commonalities would you say we all share?
A lot. We share more than we don't share. So we tend to focus on our differences and then make a big deal about it. And demagogues and political powers like to exploit that for power. You know, racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, all of that. Now, when you strip all that nonsense away, you go, well, they're conscious, we're conscious. They have a body of light, we have a body of light. They have bodies, we have bodies. They're in the cosmos, we're in the cosmos. They have a heart and intellect and emotions, but there's variation. But look, I mean, if you go to Japan, it's a very different emotional feeling than, hey, Italy, I'm going to dispatch you la faccia, I'm going to break in your face. You know, so, I mean, I'm just, sorry. But it's different even with humans, all right? So if you take, sorry, I didn't jump off the stage. If you take the totality of what there has to be in the cosmos, there's going to be huge diversity. But those are sort of external. The heart of it, consciousness, the heart, the existence of higher states of consciousness to be realized, the aspirations for a species to evolve and explore the cosmos, but also the entire multiverse of the universe and all these dimensions. That is all that we have, all that in common. And some of the civilizations are, you know, I've never actually said this, but I'll say it just because it just put it in perspective. There are civilizations that when I started this project, I was actually teaching some of those civilizations, some of what it means in these, you know, like the experience of Brahman consciousness and what have you. So there's a lot to share. We can share, they can share. Obviously, they've reached past the nuclear, as W said, threshold, and have become peaceful, or they would have destroyed themselves. Remember, one of the big differences is that if they are interstellar and transdimensional, they have unlocked technological sciences that are so amazing that if they were weaponized and they were wielded by the consciousness of violence and division, they'd be gone. They would have destroyed themselves, and certainly we'd be gone the instant we detonate the first atomic weapon. And Paula Harris has a new book out about this. And I think, you know, people need to understand that they have shown incredible restraint. So the fact that they're here, they have gone at least to the point of being a peaceful, non-violent, non-hostile civilization, doesn't mean they are happy with what they see here. And some of those civilizations are profoundly unhappy. Because, for example, when we detonate an atomic or nuclear weapon, you know the difference between atomic and a nuclear? Atomic splitting atom, nuclear is fusion, 100 times more powerful or more. So anyway, we won't have a science class right now, but it's like, but I think that's, you know, when that happens, everyone knows what an EMP is, electromagnetic pulse. What the scientists didn't know at the time when they detonated the first atomic bombs is that that extends over into a scalar signal. That is, so you know how light is this kind of thing, a wave? Laser is coherent light, where they're all synced up, red or green, whatever. A longitudinal scalar is a point, and a boom goes out like this at multiples of the speed of light. So when we detonated those things, it created a disturbance in the transdimensional superhighway of interstellar ET communication and travel. That's why they showed up en masse after the Trinity site explosion in New Mexico, and have been very concerned about our nuclear weapons. Not just the fact that we can destroy this planet, but it's very disruptive to other places, because we're all thinking speed of light, flat. It's like the flat Earth society, straight a line, linear cosmos. The cosmos isn't straight a line. It isn't linear. It's non-local and holographic. And when you start crossing into these other technologies, they're going beyond the speed of light. And it can be very dangerous. So all those civilizations where there's a big distinction is that if they're interstellar, they crossed all these technological thresholds a long time ago, and they ain't blown themselves up yet, or they wouldn't be here. And they haven't blown us up either, which, given how destructive what we've been doing is, this is, when I was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where all the Roswell stuff was in, I was doing a briefing for the division that received and works on all that technology. And the head of the head of the Air Force ordered the meeting between me and my military advisor and a CIA State Department guy. And the whole conversation went like this. He says, well, the colonel, and he had a sidekick who was a public information officer, who was actually an intelligence civilian, Air Force intelligence guy. And he says, well, what if these civilizations are hostile and are a threat to us? I said, sir, with all due respect, given the galactically stupid things we've been doing for 60 years, if that were the case, we wouldn't be breathing the free air of Earth. We'd be over. It'd be point, set, match. And they were just, he looked down and the intelligence was scribbling notes. I said, we're the problem. We're the ones who's firing on them. So I tell people, if you want to see where the problem is, get a mirror and look at it. Not you personally, but the humanity. So where we're different is that obviously if they're here and they're interstellar and they're transdimensional with sciences and physics that can do that, they cross that threshold where they've learned the ultimate lesson, that war and violence and conflict doesn't work. And the higher up, one thing if you're doing it with clubs and muskets or even a machine gun, it's another thing when you're doing it with thermonuclear weapons or these more advanced technologies, which can unfortunately be weaponized. They have been. They've already been weaponized. Unfortunately, the worst people in the world have the most powerful weapons that you don't know about. So that is the concern the ETs have. But what we have in common is that they're actually very, and there are these stereotypes, oh, they don't have any emotions, they have no heart. Well, not the PLFs. The programmed life forms that the intelligence community put on man-made UFOs to go abduct people, those are robotic things. That's what everyone thinks an alien is. The actual ETs have heart and soul and mind, and they're much more like us than you can imagine. But they're different. But we have a great deal in common.
The next question is Freddie from Sweden on the live chat. Besides meditation and breath work, is there a protocol or device available to speed up the activation process of abilities like telekinesis, telepathy, or levitation?
Yes, and we're going to get into that tomorrow. What are known as the siddhis, S-I-D-D-H-I-S. These are described in the Vedas, but other traditions also. Remember, the early Gnostic Christians and others were literally levitating in their churches in Alexandria and other places, and all that was covered up. But they would be in those same states of higher consciousness and would levitate. Now, the way that can be really sped up, and most people aren't going to want to hear this, is that you need, I like working out. I like press 900 pounds, and I'm like this beast. And you don't do that. You don't do that the first time you sit down to do it. You got to build up. So what I have told people is that you have to focus, and what you put your attention on grows most in your life. Most people spend between 4 and 6 hours a day looking at the idiot box, the TV, their phones, all kinds of superfluous rubbish. Take some of that time to take care of your body, your temple and your consciousness, but also build in a retreat. You know, if you can't, I know it's frustrating because not everyone can come for a whole week on what I do, but even go to, back years ago, before I started this project, I went to the Yogananda SRF in California, north of San Diego, and I just booked to be there for several days just to be by myself and meditate and do this. So you need to build in time, and when you do it in a what I call an intensive, like a long weekend or a whole week, or better yet, more, where you're just focused on the meditation techniques, it's an exponential growth. It's 10 times the amount of time you're spending, because it's an intensive. Most people don't do those intensives. At some point, I'd like to find a retreat center that my group can get. Well, we don't have money for it, but where we can actually do this, where it's like 2 weeks at a time or a month at a time. If somebody has one, let me know. But where it would be quiet, away from the world, on a lot of land, and people can come there for meditation, but also we would go out at night. But it would not just be for like 5 or 6 or 7. It would be for a few weeks, because eventually I want to train other teachers to do what I'm doing. I haven't had time, but you know, I'm getting old. Right now I could drop dead. So I want to get other people who can do it properly. But I think that even in your own private life, if you just take some of the time you have during the day, but also periodically build in every few months a long weekend, or if you can, a whole week to go on a meditation retreat, where it's not so much didactic like this, but there's quiet time and you're meditating. There is such an accelerant when you do that. It's exponential. And so that's what everyone should try to do. Now, once you have that experience, interestingly, spontaneously, these cities unfold.
For those wondering.
So when I was a young guy, I was on an advanced training course for meditation teachers up in upstate New York. I was maybe 20 or 21. And we were doing 8 hours a day of meditation. So we would do the breathing and the pranayama and then meditate and do this. And one morning after the first 4 hours of doing this, and it was beautiful spring, and I'm so in love with nature. And I was walking outside this place up in the Catskills, and the flowers were, and suddenly I went into this state of consciousness where I was in complete bliss. It's hard to explain. And I lifted up, and I went from like here to that wall, just up 3 or 4 feet. But as soon as my monkey mind and intellect kicked in, and I got out of that flow consciousness, how is it? What am I doing? And then it ended. It's reminiscent of the master who's trying to teach his students to walk on water, to levitate across water. And there's a guy on the banks going through all this intellectualization and doubts and stuff. And the teacher turns to the student and says, "Leave thyself behind and then walk on the water." Leave yourself behind. It's from an old, I think, a Rumi account. So you kind of get into that state when you're in a longer meditation retreat. So where you really go and you spontaneously begin having these abilities, whether it's telekinesis, remote viewing, seeing the future, levitation, all these things sort of unfold organically. Now, once you have that experience, there's a technique to really accelerating it. And we'll talk about that tomorrow, but it had a hint. When you're in that really deep, quiet state, you intend to be able to do whatever this city is. But you do it in a very steady state of mind with great intent and power, but not straining. It's a balance. It's a very subtle balance of not straining, and the energy is flowing from an infinite source through you. And you will find that you can teleport, levitate, do all kinds of stuff. But that there is a specific technique that is very advanced to that. It's going to be beyond scope probably this weekend, but I'll talk about it a little more tomorrow.
Heck yeah. Our next question is from the audience here in Boulder, Colorado. It is Neshama, and it's a 2-part. When a ship appears, what is the most helpful thing to say to extraterrestrials to help humanity? Have you gotten a sense of the timing of a global visitation when multiple ships will arrive?
Two questions there. The first one, when you're having a contact event, it's better to listen and receive than to project. You welcome them, you open your heart, and then you ask them for guidance or what their message is. We always need to take time to listen as much as we transmit. So I tell people it's important to be a receiver as much as a transmitter, looking at it that way. So when the contact events happen, I usually will go and approach the craft or the beings, like I've said, with this sort of position, but connecting in heart and mind together. And I will invite them and thank them. Always thank them for coming. It's very risky. So you thank them, you express gratitude, and then you ask them, how do we work together? What should we be doing with these other civilizations to make it across this abyss that humanity is facing? And then you need to receive that. But in the second part of the question, there's not a point in time. Let's say it's an event horizon. So time is really the delta of change, the rate of change. And we, as a civilization, could have achieved everything we've been talking about today 50, 100 years ago. Now, what's deterministic there? It's the aggregate state of consciousness, a critical mass, as it were, in people doing the right thing, but also manifesting the courage to do it. The only exception to that, and I don't want to end on too much of a negative note here, but in a worst case scenario, and if you read my first book, I go through these. It was a white paper I did for the White House, actually. Early on. It's called the Comprehensive Assessment of the UFO ETI, Extraterrestrial Intelligence. So I get a call from a senior aerospace engineer at old McDonnell Douglas that's merged with Boeing aircraft. And he says, this is the most accurate how do you know this? I said, well, I only, experiences I've had. And it outlines this other scenario. So a mass event like this being asked about can happen if we come together peacefully. And I've had a lucid dream of the future where that happens. It's an amazing outfit. This story is beautiful. And that's one possible future, but it can't happen until there's been a stand-down order in place of these unacknowledged projects, and they respond to the stand-down order. All right, two things here. I mean, right now, if the president issued an order on something like this, they go, buzz off, buddy. We're not listening to you. You're only the president. So, but if we get to that point, and I think it'll happen through a shift, one of the things I do during the course of a week training is that I take people into consciousness and we visit every covert site and corporation that's running these programs. And with no fear or hate, with pure love, we send them this vision of a new world. As Colonel Course, it's a new world, if you can take it. So we always do that. And you should remember to do that. Don't respond to these interests with hatred and disdain and what have you, but with compassion that, forgive them. They know not what they do. They're ignorant of the consequences on a deep level of what they're doing. But that can change in their hearts and in their minds. And don't underestimate how powerful you can be to do that. When I was 18, I was in college and I had this near-death experience and learned meditation. There were all these drunk, rowdy boys in the dorm. They were segregated dorms back then, male and female. And there were these group of guys who were drinking and driving and going from this little town where I was in North Carolina to another town that wasn't a dry county. Back then we had dry counties, no alcohol. But the road was like this cliffhanger crazy. People got killed all the time. And I had a vision that these guys were going to run off the road one night and kill themselves. And so I was sitting meditating in my room, and I actually asked the Great Spirit to change their behavior and heart and mind. A few minutes later, boom, 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 they knock on the door, and I open it, and it's them. They're not friends. And they're looking almost through me to some other aspect of us all. And says, oh, forgive us, we won't do this anymore. We're sorry if we've been I never had a conversation in my life with them. And they never did that anymore. There was something profound that happened. So don't underestimate the power prayer and meditation and thought. It can be very transformative if it's done in a very pure-hearted way, not a forced way, but this empowerment of a higher state of consciousness. So that can happen. So the best outcome, to answer that question, would be we can keep working on this path. The military actually become protectors of peace. And in this experience I had in the 70s, I was at what looks like White Sands, where the first atomic bomb went off. And I'm there, I'm much older, of course, 70s, I was 20 something. And I'm leading, and there's thousands of people there and a lot of officials. And it's all being streamed to the whole world. Now, I didn't know how that could happen back in 1970, whatever it was when I had this happen, late 70s. I was in Israel, I think, when that happened, 78, 79, 80. But I was shown crystal clear, lucid vision of the future where this is happening. And the military were actually securing the area. And there's this beautiful, seamless, egg-shaped craft, not that big, that descends in a blue sky and hovers, and an elder ET comes out. Very ancient ET. And this is all seen by the entire world. That's one outcome. Now, another outcome is we stay on the path of foolishness that our society is engaged in now, and we get to an ELE, extinction level event, massive earth changes or some thermonuclear war. At a certain critical point, there will be a mass intervention by these civilizations. But that's a worst case. That's when 4 to 6 billion people are perishing. And that's one possible outcome of the path. The path we're on now is that path, if we don't divert. So this is, I was at Tony Robbins' house and I was talking to he and his wife about this. I said, we don't have a lot of time to do a course correction here because we've lost 100 years where we should have. So that is a possibility. It's a worst case scenario. But here's a hint. All of you who understand CE5, if that happens, you're going to be the point of contact for your community. You don't know it. That's one of the reasons I'm doing this. There's a chance that may happen, in which case you're it. Think about where you live. How many people understand this at this level, can do it? So I have multiple levels of dimensions that we're working on with this project, but that's one. But let's hope and pray that doesn't happen, obviously. But there's an old saying, when I lived in the Middle East, the Bedouins had a saying, trust in God, but tie your camel. All right, so you have to have contingency plans. And as an emergency doctor, you have A, B, C, D. You have all these contingency, best case, worst case. So you hope for the best, you plan for the worst, and if you're prepared for the worst, you can make it through. So that is one possibility. I'm hoping that enough people understand the imperative of consciousness and developing the conscious faculty and enlightenment and peaceful contact, that it alters, that 1% is reached, and it alters all of humanity as well as the military industrial complex. That can still happen. So just remember, never give up hope and always stay on that path. Yep.
The next question is from Cyril, who is in France.
Oh, wonderful.
Do you think there will be open mainstream contact during this decade? Some channelers have predicted it to happen from 2025 to 2035.
Well, honestly, there's been open contact for much longer. It's already happened. The fact that the corrupt media with the intelligence community have silenced it and covered it up, that's the issue. So let's unpack that for a minute. That's the issue. So let's unpack that for a minute. It's already happened. It's already happened. There have been mass events, mass sightings. When we detonated the first hydrogen bomb, there was a 9 ET craft over Washington, D.C. We have the photograph. It was on radar, right? You all have seen it. It's in our materials, disclosure materials. So that was in 52. I wasn't a twinkle in my father's eye then. So I tell people, this has all been controlled. And remember, the Wilbur Smith document from Canada, 1950, top secret, accidentally got declassified. It's in my book. And one of the points it makes is that this issue is the most secret project in the United States history exceeding the development of the hydrogen bomb, which had not been detonated yet. That was 1950. So there are very powerful interests that have to be transformed for that to happen, because it could happen somewhere tomorrow. And even with the internet, and even with, it would all just be blocked and taken down. So I think that it's not, you know, it's not a linear sort of logistical question. It's a question of consciousness and evolution, and also standing down corrupt interests and how they control what the media feeds to you. And now, unfortunately, the big tech companies are also doing that. You know, remember, I mean, they all talk like hippies, back like Nazis, unfortunately. And ouch, I'm sorry I said that, but it's really true. And it's diabolical how much they're sanitizing algorithms and the internet away from what people all should know and are entitled to know. So I think we have to begin to understand that that happening is dependent on a holistic, multi-pronged approach that we're doing. There has to be disclosure, there has to be the raising of consciousness, there has to be lots of people making contact, there has to be the shift in consciousness of the aggregate of the body of humanity, and then those can line up, and it can happen. So all those things need to happen. Again, the ETs are not going to force something where they know, and here's why. And if I figured out this with my meager IQ, when Bijou appeared, I asked him, I was telepathically sensed, I grokked, that his IQ was about the human equivalent of 450. And I said that to the whole group, and then the detector went beep, beep, yes. So look, I figured out in the early 90s that if they were to do anything very invasive, sort of a big event, the intelligence community and the media colluding with them. Look what they've done the last few years with all the stuff with the TTSA and the, you know, Elizondo stuff, and everything, news channels talking about the UAPs and UFOs being a national security threat. It's all been a threat narrative. Well, that would be, they would play straight into the hands of the intelligence community that wants interplanetary war. Remember what Reagan said. They want to unite the world, not in peace, but in an alien threat that unites the world in war. So yes, you can unite people through war. Look what happened after 9/11. But you can also destroy a planet in interplanetary when you do it to that level. So that is the real challenge that we're facing. And I think the solution ultimately is in spirituality, consciousness, knowledge, enlightenment, all of that. And because the ETs, if they were to do something right now that would be seen by the whole world instantly, every channel, major media in the world would portray it as a threat and an invasion, a violation of our airspace. That's how, if you look at the news, take all the clippings of the last 2 years, since they've been leaking all these images and stuff in the New York Times and mainstream. That's the sub rosa, the current that's in every single story. It's subtle. These people aren't stupid. They know to do it in a very nuanced, almost subliminal way. So the ETs know this. The ETs know that they would run through a trigger, a tripwire, and boom, the world would be, say, see, there is a threat, and they've invaded. They come into they landed without our permission. You know, that's the kind of stuff that these guys are saying on CNN and Fox News. So I think we have to be very careful, you know, and be wise enough to understand if we have figured this out, they figured it out in the 50s. So this is why they're being very careful, because they know that there are people who will take any story and spin it. Let me give you an example. I put together for the Disclosure Project before 2001, all these guys who had been at nuclear weapon bases, silos, NORAD out here, Cheyenne Mountain, yeah. And every one of them told me when the ET craft had been in those areas that the feeling they got is they were trying to warn us of how dangerous these weapons are to them and us. But some charlatans in the fake disclosure movement globally grabbed up these guys, repackaged it, and with the narrative that was covered all the time in New York Times and CNN and Larry King, they've invaded our nuclear weapons facilities and they're a threat to our nuclear readiness and our arsenal. So they took same incidents and spun it in the direction of a threat. When in reality, in private conversations I've had with these men, they're going, no, we were feeling like they were really concerned for the future of Earth, but they weren't doing anything at all violent. If you look at the general who recently, through the 20th anniversary disclosure event that we have up on our website that we did in April, you'll see that this Russian general talks about an event where there was an overheating thermonuclear weapon in the old Soviet Union, that the ETs came in and the people were sort of put in sort of a suspended trance while they went in there literally and fixed it so it wouldn't explode. Which, if that happened, could have triggered the hot wire to go thermonuclear global. So they're very concerned about this kind of nonsense. And yet, when something happens where they're doing something actually to help us, the intelligence community spinmeisters are really pros at taking it and flipping it 180 degrees from what the reality is. So my concern about an event like this person asked about is that the world has to be ready to do it properly. And when we're ready, they'll come. So this is why we have to prepare ourselves and the population for this kind of open event. And it will eventually happen. But I think that we have some work to do.
I think we have just enough time for one last question.
Yeah.
And the question is an Events Plus member on the live stream, Kristen from Texas.
Mm-hmm.
How can we be sure that we don't accidentally contact a being who are not of light or service to others? Mm-hmm. Is it coming from a place of love truly enough? Is coming from a place of love truly enough to avoid that?
If you're in a state of love and higher consciousness, that is what's going to be. Like seeketh like, and taketh pleasure in the company of its kind. Number one. Number two, when you're in these states of consciousness, you may bump into some lower dimensional creature, but it's not an extraterrestrial. So this is why I went through the cosmology very quickly. We're going to go through it more tomorrow, because most people who have that experience, it's very negative, are interacting with not an extraterrestrial, but an ultra-terrestrial, a being from another dimension, but not from another star system. Now, because most people don't know that those are two distinct, discrete, D-I-S-C-R-E-T-E, not D-I-S-C-R-E-E-T. In the English language, people use those two words improperly. Events, they're very, confused, because they'll be in a state and all of a sudden there'll be some boogum, like the Lockheed Skunk Works underground, where they pull these things in. That chupalabra, whatever that thing was, it got loose in Montauk that was running around. Remember that? Oh, hello. See?
It's the angels again.
There, see? So I think that, people can bump into that, but I don't know anyone on our team in 31 years has had that experience, because if they stay in the higher consciousness and the purpose of what we're doing, you're going to experience this other. Now, if you don't have clarity, or you have an aspect to yourself that is some way attracted to that lower aspect, yeah, you might have that. But it's not an extraterrestrial. It's going to be one of these other things from a lower dimension, denser or ignorant. But don't worry about that. Once you understand the power of consciousness, all that stuff is like a gnat flying in front of the sun. Don't give it any power. It has no real power.
Okay. Well, we have a little bit more time. I want to squeeze one more question in.
Yep.
And this one is from Cameron in the audience here at Gaia Sphere. I believe music is the best invention of our species. How is a ripping guitar solo like Johnny B. Good viewed by a transcendental or light being? Transcendental or light being, I'm sorry.
Well, they're transcendental and light beings, and they're extraterrestrials, and but I think that all civilizations have their version of what we call music. And we have had that experience where we were out in the wilderness and we have this beautiful melodic crystalline tone that comes in. We've had our magnetometer do a symphony, which they're not even designed to do. We've recorded these. I mean, it's this 100. I don't keep track of anything digital, so I have people who do it. Sometimes they steal it, sometimes I never see it. But that's an amazing thing. And so I think that it's universal. I think music, tonality. Let's get, what is music? It's tonality. The mantra is a tone. The puja is actually kind of musical. The language, the cadence, and intonation of language has a musical beat component to it. The music of the spheres, which is real. When I was out in space, after I first started this project, I actually was shown and heard each planet's tone, which were all different. And it's real. That's not mythological. It's beautiful. If I were musical, I could recreate them, but you never want to hear me sing, except maybe the puja, which is not singing. But I think that is universal. But they do appreciate. I think there's so much about humanity that is loved and appreciated, and the earth. And remember, it's only a very small number of the population who really want war and really want to take every opportunity to exploit it. How many people benefit from the petrodollar oil system? Very, very few, really. How many people benefit from war? A relatively small handful of sociopathic corporate people, et cetera, and so on. So I think they understand that most of humanity is beautiful. Most humans are beautiful, that our cultures and what we can create and our creativity and they very much appreciate it. But I think these other civilizations, from what I've experienced in going there or having experiences in our group where things are actually played to us, are equally aware of music and have their own version of it, although it's different. Like a sitar is different from a piano or what have you. But I think it's universal. And I tell people that one of the reasons I think drumming and chanting, like a mantra, are so important, it has a resonance aspect to it that is sound and tone. And remember, in the beginning, there was the word, and the word was so the word in that case in the Bible, it really means the tonality of sound, of thought sound, which is what a mantra is. And from there, you materialize, you create light. And from light, you create form. And from form, in the astral architecture, you create matter. We're going to go through this tomorrow. The whole how nothingness of unbounded mind and consciousness becomes all this. It's a beautiful, beautiful journey. We'll go through that tomorrow. And so I feel that people need to understand that when we're doing this, the ETs understand much of this and are actually practicing it in their operational paradigm. But we're just now discovering it. The ancient peoples and enlightened masters understood all this, very much so. But I think our modern civilization has done a great job with, again, reductionist material sciences, but it's devoid of this deeper understanding that would actually guide it into the best outcome. And that's why we have to bring the physics and science of consciousness and spirituality together with material sciences. And that's when we're going to really blossom as a civilization.
Okay, we are out of time. Thank you, Dr. Greer.
Thank you, guys. You've been great. Thank you.
Yeah.